So, hi everyone. I'm Joss Whipple. I'm a member of the founding team of Fashion Revolution, but I'm also a founder of Mend Assembly, along with Kat Herity, who's here today, Padook and Tom, who are currently looking after their tiny baby. Today, basically, we've been hosting these socials, like bi-weekly socials for people in Totnes particularly, to come along and just kind of stitch and bitch and talk about all different things. And they've been really successful, and we're kind of gutted that we're not able to hold those at the moment. So we're shifting online, and we've invited some really exciting friends from our network to join us today to chat about this whole new era of renting and selling direct from your wardrobe. And it's something that personally, you know, I haven't actually done a lot of, but it's sort of being pitched as a sort of solution, and as part of the kind of whole circularity conversation. We're going to talk about it today and just see where we're at and what we think about it, and hopefully it'll be interesting, and we'll be helping each other to kind of navigate it and make sense of it as well, and hopefully helping some of you who are watching. So we're just going to go around quickly and introduce ourselves. I'll just say as well, as part of my introduction, I haven't done any renting or selling at all. I've only just started looking at all the different platforms and stuff. So I'm on the fence. I don't know if it's a solution or not. I'm not sure about it. So I'm going to pass to you, Kalkadam.
Okay. So first of all, I just think the phrase stitch and bitch is amazing. Every time you say it, Josh, someone's just like, whoa, what a desirable thing to do.
It's what
we do. Yeah, so I'm Kalkdan. So my kind of main thing for the past few years has been Sancho's, and we are a sustainable fashion retailer and brand based in the Southwest. We have a very strict sourcing policy for our stores, so we use largely the information provided by Fashion Revolution and EcoAge and all of these informative sites that can tell people how they might choose to buy things that are sustainable. And we try to curate them all under one roof so that our customers can always trust that what they buy from us is sustainable. So that's what we do at Sancho's. It's been fantastic. It's been like a really great few years. And in that, what I've noticed is we're trying to tackle this problem of fashion waste and overconsumption, but we're in this retailing linear model of business. And my apologies, we're in this linear model of business, and at some point, not now because we're a tiny company at the moment, but at some point, there is a contradiction between selling first-hand goods and long-term sustainability. So what we're trying to do now is understand how we can build that function of resale into a business model that we feel will sustain us. And we think that if it can sustain us and if it meaningfully could provide a livelihood for us, then it can for others as well. And that's our current project. It's called Schwab. And at the moment, we're just trying to really understand what the problem is in fashion, and how that problem kind of varies from person to person, so that we can, offer a solution, hopefully. That's me.
Roxy?
Okay, I am one of the founding members of Fashion Revolution. So I've worked with Joss for a very, very long time, but also prior to that and alongside, I worked for a brand called Catherine Hamnet for nearly 11 years, and post that, alongside the launch of Fashion Revolution, I launched an agency, if you like, called The Right Project, which has really kind of evolved into a collective of sustainable specialists in the fashion industry, and we really support brands and talent to understand what responsible fashion means to them. I was thinking about this theme. whilst I was at Catherine Hamner, I think I really learned and understood, because I came from a fashion PR background where everything was about buying and new, and our offices were on Oxford Street, and at that age, I was 21, 22. You passed all the high street stores on your way home and didn't really think twice. You had your disposable income, no kids, maybe a rent and some food and alcohol. So my purchasing practices back then, when I think about it, were, I didn't think anything of buying something new on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, but it was cheap. And I think when I moved to Catherine Hamlin and started to understand the impact of the industry, but alongside that, she really introduced me to vintage shopping. So I was thinking about what you were saying, Joss, but actually, and you saying you haven't really delved into it, but you have, but offline. Because think about, I was thinking of Camden Passage. So I grew up in London, so Camden Passage. Then on Goodge Street, there was a store called Bash, and the thrill of like finding vintage garments and shoes and handbags, and I actually was really into that. I was thinking back to it, and some of those army surplus pieces and stuff like that. I really enjoyed all of that. So I think that was one part of my life, and then I think moving into sustainability may have actually, I realized, has changed that. But I do love those charity shops that you kind of dive into and you find those, and I kind of enjoy that experience. So from that perspective, I do have experience. From an online perspective, less so. I haven't quite got my head around the whole rental markets yet, and but in the work we do with brands, we are seeing brands asking how can they put longevity into the products that they're making. What kind of rental schemes could they have with their customers? How would that work? The whole logistics of it all is really interesting to me. And so yeah, that's where I am on this.
Cool, thanks. Kat, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So I worked in the fashion industry for probably about 14 years or so. I've always had a real love-hate relationship with it, right back from finishing uni and doing work experience at some different fashion magazines, and then I did some work experience at Betty Jackson, and I really loved it, but I did kind of think that it was quite a horrible industry to be in sometimes as well, especially when you're at the bottom. But I still went on to work in the industry, designed for lots of different people. And I think I was just saying to Joss this morning about Bangladesh. I think that's, I was in Bangladesh in spring of 2013. And just before Rana Plaza happened, and really the whole experience of being in Bangladesh, I felt really uneasy the whole time I was there. And it was when I really started to question whether I wanted to be a part of the industry anymore. And I'd been sent on there as the women's wear manager for a surfwear brand. I'd been sent there to recall orders because they hadn't made them on time and they hadn't met deadlines and all kinds of horrible things, and I really didn't want to do that anymore. Anyway, and then here we are now, and I've worked with lots of different little startup brands and things in between, and really kind of tried to keep sustainability at the core of what everyone does. So now we're here, we're doing Mend Assembly, which is brilliant, and we're all really passionate about it, and it's a brilliant project. And so going back to the question of selling and renting sites, I've used eBay a lot for many years, and as we'll probably touch on later, growing up in Totnes, we have a brilliant secondhand market and brilliant vintage clothes as well, and always have done. And I think when I was at uni, I probably started shopping proper vintage shops, and really enjoyed the experience of finding amazing stuff as well. And I wanted to do my whole final major on reconstituted or repurposed vintage clothing, but I wasn't allowed to do it. Anyway, but yeah, I've used eBay quite a lot. I ventured into Depop probably in about 2014, and it didn't really go anywhere, so I kind of gave that up. But yeah, lots of charity shop and secondhand and vintage markets and things, and And you know, as I say, we're really lucky in Totnes that we've got amazing access to all of that stuff. But yeah, so I have used in a little bit. There you go. On to Rox. No, Rox. Kelly, sorry.
I'm Kelly. I guess I'm an advisor to fashion brands specialising in the social and environmental impacts of the industry. I work independently, but also more recently and more excitingly in the last year or so as part of the Right Project Collective with Roxy and Joss. So my work generally, I help brands to develop and deliver responsible fashion strategies across a wide range of challenges they face. So usually it's kind of finding that big vision and purpose for their work around sustainability, but then also kind of delving into manufacturing materials, customer use, end of life, demystifying language around sustainability, traceability, transparency, and then down to kind of measuring impact and how to communicate it. So helping brands really to put sort of work plans in place for actually practically just getting on with the work and having an impact and a tangible impact as well. So yeah, pretty much everything related to down the supply chain and across business operations, but I'm not a technical specialist, so it's more just a generalist advisory role. In terms of renting and selling, I'm exactly the same as you, Joss. I have been on the fence since day one, and I always feel like the rental thing, well, so far has been skewed by the press. Because in the beginning, I was like, I don't understand how that's going to go mainstream. Because I always, in everything to do with sustainability, I try not to jump in and get too excited straight away. And I'll bring myself back to my, okay, I'm in my sustainable fashion bubble, in my fashion bubble, in my London bubble. What about where I grew up? In Dublin, my friends, my family, and especially in Ireland in particular, the fashion industry or the fashion market is really small. It's mostly dominated by the high street, and you would have maybe a really small amount of independent boutiques right across the country as well. But I'm like, would people there actually rent? Would they really use this service? So I try to always sort of take a step back. And then from the sustainability side of things, I'm straight into, right, what about carbon emissions? What about dry cleaning? You know, all of those kind of things that stack up around it. So I'm never the first to jump on board with things. I like to get really deep into the research of all of the impacts, which can be kind of paralyzing sometimes. But others, then I feel like I'm making a kind of really informed choice. But what I have done is more on the reselling side. I haven't resold, but I buy secondhand online quite a bit. So I use eBay, same as you can, and Depop as well. And more recently, I found an app called Gem, which is an aggregator for all vintage, not all, a lot of vintage sites into one place, which you could lose days of your life in there. And in one way, I'm like, it's amazing and it's really exciting. But then also, I think it just encourages more of that scrolling culture of just going deep and deep and deep and then buying for the sake of buying type thing. But anyway, we'll talk about that a bit down the line. But yeah, I'm on the fence too. So
I think for me, what's coming through right away is this.
No, just go.
What? This juxtaposition between, which we're all dealing with and on every level with everything in our lives, this juxtaposition between things happening in reality, in our physical reality, and things happening online. And yeah, so where does that kind of, where are the pros and cons around it, and where does it, like you said, just become this additional kind of addiction almost to like being on our phones and buying stuff and getting stuff, as opposed to something where you really go out and you have this kind of experience, like you were saying, Rox, and you, Kat, as well. Like basically there's this shop in Totnes called Revival, and it is the best, most amazing vintage store I've ever been in. I've been in lots, and it basically, in fact, I got a black velvet hooded Catherine Hamnett silk velvet jacket in there when I was probably about 17, and it's absolute treasure. I still got it, and I might be able to rent it, I don't know, but I love it. And it's that you were saying, Rox, that experience of delving into something on a physical level and finding these treasures is very different to seeing them on the screen.
Finding them on eBay feels the same. To a certain degree, it feels the same. I think just in this rental area, so the rental bit for me at the moment, but you may all know better, is it feels like there's the rental that's the peer-to-peer, so it is along the lines of the eBay, but then there's the rental that's, it feels like it's been set up, they're in touch with a number of brands that people want to buy into but can't, and they're really providing that platform so that people can, you know, rent an item for a few days and then send it back. Yeah, so I suppose on that level, the peer-to-peer, so Joss, it would be you taking that Catherine Hamlet jacket or that amazing green dress that you posted on Instagram. You have to look at Joss's Instagram to see it, but whether you would feel like, I can part with that and someone can rent it. So for the person renting it on a peer-to-peer basis, is that because you don't wear it that much, or you're not in love with it anymore, or do you love it but you know that you should share it? I mean, I can't get my head around that side of it as much. And then on the rental side with the brands, from a sustainable aspect, and Kelly, maybe it's something you can help me get my head around, those are still conventional brands. They're still producing those collections that then somehow it's being fed by the media that there's some way sustainable because you're only renting it. But I'm like, but the resources still go into creating it and the processes, and you know, if that's not coming from a brand that's got sustainable, you know, credentials as such, I think it's really tentative using that language. So yeah, they're my two things.
I mean, yeah, the environmental stuff around that works, like you say, it's the shipping, it's the still making new products, and then also the dry cleaning. I mean, like, I was reading an article a couple of months ago, but from the CEO of Rent the Runway, and she was saying we're basically a professional dry cleaning service. That is our job. So we need to do a rental, I think. Are they using green dry cleaning services? What are they doing about their emissions to do with transport? You know, it's all of that kind of thing. And then also how, you know, where are the metrics? I'm always, you two know, always about the data and the impact. I'm like, where are the metrics around how often each garment is being reused? And how does that get offset on the other end if they were just going to sell it? Because Levi's did this piece of work. I can't remember the exact statistics off the top of my head, but they worked out the carbon emissions of renting a piece over X period of time and actually producing a new one. And they reckon, and I haven't read the report myself, that carbon emissions are lower for actually just going out and buying a new pair of jeans and owning them for a really long time, in terms of like washing and caring and that kind of thing.
I guess my point is, if it's a conventional, if it's not a sustainable brand that you're renting in the first place, you've also got that to add on to the cycle.
But Kalkadan, so what about, how are you tackling all of that stuff? Well, I'm curious, two things. I still want to talk about more about this idea of physical versus virtual, but Kalkadan, like, how are you tackling the whole like carbon?
So, I mean, I think that the problems need to be kind of reframed a little bit. So when you talk about like peer-to-peer renting, essentially it becomes like a question of incentive. So what incentive does a person have to like catalogue their wardrobe, organise it, and then make it available for random people to borrow it for short periods of time and send it back to them? And the truth is, like, as a buyer or a leaser of a rented item of clothing, what items would we want to lease or borrow? Like, maybe we want to lease, I mean, probably they'll be tied to specific events. So maybe like occasion wear or outdoor clothing or whatever. But most of the clothes that we want to have like regular and easy access to, it's unlikely that we're going to want to demand them for a short period of time. Yeah. So then that itself like limits the demand of the product. In terms of supply of the product, yeah, there are strange incentives, because I could spend probably like 4, 5, 10 days organising my wardrobe, making it available to rent, but do I have confidence of what I will get for that effort in time? Like, not at all. So I think the likelihood that there's a mass demand from peer-to-peer lending, or mass supply to peer-to-peer lending, is limited. And I think what worries me is that it becomes kind of a lifestyle activity for certain type of people, which is fine, but is it a solution to the environmental problems of the fashion industry? I don't think so, unless you know, everyone has the ability to rent occasion wear when they want and go to events, and also the time and the effort and the energy to catalogue their clothing, and I think that's probably not true. When it comes to business to peer, I think once again it comes down to incentives again, because a business is only going to really want to do that if there's some scalability available. And so I never thought about it in terms, Kelly, you bringing up that businesses are all, creating new products in order to make them available to rent. But of course that's what they're going to do, because clothing itself downgrades, it loses value over time because it's a perishable product. You know, not all clothing is, and of course it can be designed to last longer, but the clothing we have available at the moment perishes more or less over time. So if you're then incentivizing businesses to produce new items with no check of the environmental consequences of that, I think that's limited too. So I think, having kind of gone around the problem for a while, I think it's a problem of infrastructure, and I would say it's a problem of multi-channel infrastructure. So physical spaces, like for example the men's assembly, where people have some place to go into their towns and cities to repair their clothes or rent clothes or whatever, sell their clothes or whatever, and digital spaces that matches supply and demand a bit more accurately. And I would say that that's probably the format of the solution that might be scalable.
So just for us, here, I haven't rented anything online, and I think I might rent something online if it was like you said, an occasion wear is the only kind of time I could really imagine myself renting something online. Or maybe, like you said, something like I'm going on a special trip and I need a special sort of outdoor kit, or I don't want to rent it. That sort of makes a lot of sense. But I definitely, with Men's Assembly, our idea is to sort of basically have this service as a permanent offering, but at a physical level, to a much more localized community. And for me, there's something quite different about that feeling of there's just a sort of reduced sense of anonymity for a start, so it feels immediately kind of safer to know that if I'm into a physical space and I'm renting something from someone else who I know is also part of that same physical locale, that same community, I feel, I don't know, personally, it feels less strange to me.
Renting though, Joss, isn't it? It's like, when I have rented before years ago for my school debutante ball type thing. That's when you did it, and everyone, the boys rented a tux, you went and rented a dress, or mum made one, whatever it was at the time. But I never even crossed my mind since then to ever do it. But definitely it was a really exciting feeling to go in and have this selection of things that you actually could have access to, because normally you go and see the price point of designer things, and at that age especially, they were no way in near my access unless I went to a charity shop and found an amazing thing. So the physical space for me is because actually, Roxy, I was thinking when you were talking about Catherine Hamlet, sorry, one quick thing. I've also worked at Catherine Hamlet London, disclaimer. And Roxy gave me my first job in fashion at Catherine Hamlet London. But one really cool thing that we used to do back in the day was, do you remember, Roxy, on Fridays, Catherine used to take us to Portobello Market?
Yeah.
Friday mornings, because that was when the sellers had their best design stuff. So I went once, and there was this beautiful red Chanel coat that I could just about afford, but of course the dealers only take cold hard cash, so I'm running off, getting the cash, running back, praying it'd still be there, and they weren't being very nice about hanging on to it, and I managed to get it. I still have it to this day, and I think about those experiences of being in Portobello Market, because we didn't, in Ireland there wasn't much access to secondhand clothes. There's one or two, or to nice vintage clothes, one or two shops, but those physical kind of, that you had to go the extra mile to make an effort, but maybe that's the equivalent of the eBay bid process, but that it's a mental effort and not so much a physical one as well. So anyway,
but Joss, what you were saying, and Kalkadan, what you were saying about the occasion, there are some of these rental sites that it's not about the occasion. So I was looking into them, and it was blowing my mind. So you go in, so I did do one of them. Go in, and you basically fill out you know, the profile of yourself. So you're handing over that data so that their AI can start working out, you know, what size you are, what colors you like, what styles you like. And some of these sites is not occasional where they're sending you like basically a pack of your outfits, and then you would turn that around. I think some of them are, if you like them, you can actually purchase them. You know, I don't know what the process is, and then it all goes back again, and then you get, and it's almost like there's loads of those going on, like in wellness now, and you know, those whole beauty boxes that they just arrive and things like. So that's the bit I find extraordinary, that you might go to a space where AI will start to define what you're wearing. And I was thinking maybe just this group of women here, because we work in the industry and we've just maybe the way we buy and purchase and make and mend, we may not have the hat on of these people who like I was 20 years ago, go out and buy something every week. And actually this is a really easy way of them having all their outfits they need for their job, their high, you know, whatever job they do, that they need those dresses to wear every day, or that top and that skirt, or those trousers, or whatever it is. Those people that feel like their wardrobe has to be new all the time. This is what these guys have created, this kind of automated.
It's so true. And like when you're talking about it like that, realized actually as well, maybe it's a really good solution to like the secondary market and like the dumping that's happening with all the clothes that's being donated. So I don't know how you're structuring your version of it, Kalkadan, but it's making me think like you could just buy up and be a curator of secondhand clothes, couldn't you? And you would need that sort of technology, but you could make it much smaller and more personal. And actually that's what you did. It's sort of job creation, isn't it? You sort through a big stock of secondhand, and you're basically circulating it through a different, like a membership virtually. So yeah, rather than people having to have the responsibility of owning.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like the thought that we don't need to own anything in the future is fascinating, that we can just pay for access to various goods and services and then have things sent to us, perhaps by AI, perhaps by some sort of choice, or some master stylist somewhere like choosing what we all have, or maybe based on what's available in the marketplace. Yeah, absolutely. I think for it to be like, the question is though, is that a new business model that's solving the problem of like choice or time, or just, you know, a new way to exploit the market, or is it because that will reduce waste in the fashion industry? And I think for the latter to be the case, then there has to be a plan for what happens after a garment is worn, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to see.
I think that's what we're going to see then.
Busting to say something there. Go on, Kat.
I was going to say that I think there's two things that come out of this, and this is kind of how, not us necessarily in this group here, even, you know, within our followers necessarily, but I think there is, you know, I've kind of seen like a cultural shift here, either towards people who are far too busy to do anything for themselves, and shopping is one of those things. And this answer, you know, all of those, the business to peer platforms, and as you're talking about, the ones that select your wardrobe and send you your wardrobe package, that's a solution for that kind of person. But at the same time, you know, Kalkadan, as you mentioned, this becoming like a lifestyle thing, way back, talking about people spending hours scrolling, but actually in a lot of places shopping is an activity that people do on weekends, and that's what they do regularly. Every single weekend they go to a city, or they're in the city and they go and shop. And this is kind of why we have so much stuff, you know, many clothes, so many things, items, and people would feel that constant need to just go and get new all the time. And actually, so I mean, it's just switching one lifestyle activity for another, and whether that's online or physically going to shops and going to spaces. What is the, you know,
but is the impact
something I don't know.
But are the impacts potentially lower of having that rental package delivered once a week rather than going and buying new once a week? And I think that's what we've got to sort of figure out, isn't it, for ourselves? And that's what you're sort of like, that's what I'm trying to weigh up. with like whether this is a better option or not. And I think it's like so many other issues within this movement, sort of like it gets like rental, and then it gets attached to circularity, and then it's good, it's great, it's the solution, and everyone's like, okay, great, I don't need to think about it anymore. But actually it's like saying organic is the be all and end all for cotton, you know. It's like, it's never as simple as that, is it? And that's the problem.
I mean, I think the thing with the subscription service as well is like, do you actually have that amount of new clothes every single week or every single month? You know, it's amazing to switch it up, and that's where you're talking about, it's the lifestyle thing of like, oh cool, but I'm like, really, do we all consume that much on average? I'm talking about, obviously there's every end of the spectrum, but I don't know, like I read a really interesting piece in the Business of Fashion, I can't remember the author's name, but anyway, she trialed loads of rental platforms and she gave a review of them and the benefits, and at the very end she said that after trialing, I think it was like 5 or 6, it just made her feel like going out to shop more. Even yeah, and that was the conclusion at the very end of it, because she'd seen different products and different ways, like Roxy, you were saying, she gave all her information to one and it gave her back all the choices that were, you know, particular to her, but they were sending her random selections, and she was like, oh, but I know that that's on that other one, and she'd go over here to this one. And anyway, the ultimate conclusion was like, going to shop more at the end of it. Now she is just one person and not a big sample at all, but you kind of, I can see as someone who spends a lot of time online searching for vintage finds, how that can happen, because you do get that high and the frenzy and the search for, you know, so I don't know.
But Kelly, that high you're talking about is what some people still, yours just happens to be vintage, or might be because of your mindset around sustainable clothes, but for that high is still that something, it's a cultural thing, like Kat was saying, that to shift a society to shop differently. I was thinking the only issue I have with the subscription is that for example, not to hark back to Fashion Revolution, but Fashion Revolution, we had this this week something called the Love Story, where you had to find an item of clothing that you loved and write a story about it. And what I found extraordinary, and sorry to my friends that came back to me with this, but we had to send it out to some of our friends to generate these stories. And I had friends come back to me and say, I don't have any emotional connection to any of my clothes. Nothing. Zero, not one piece. And that, I found that like, what I said, what, not even a dress that you wore to, or nobody gave you anything, or, and I was thinking, isn't that worrying that it is roughly my generation, I think, so I'm 40 now, that got hit by the high street, you know, coming in when we were in that late teens, early 20s. And for some, I think it's just wiped out that the generation had before. You know, when I was younger, I used to get handed down things. And I think this rental subscription, I think all that's going to serve is that disconnection to who's making your clothes and any value to them and loving something. And that's what's terrifying, is almost it may serve as a tool to disconnect us further. So I mean,
I was thinking exactly the same thing, as exactly the same thing, Rox, as you were talking, as been talking, like this really potentially, and also it absolves us maybe of responsibility for care of our clothing. That's another thing we talk about a lot at Men's Assembly. Obviously, that purposes of Men's Assembly is to help people kind of remember how to take care of their clothes, and so if you're just renting a bundle of clothes that lands in your lap, you get to use it or not use it, and then you just send it back, and it's not your problem. You don't have to worry about how it gets cleaned, you don't have to worry where it came from, and you don't have to, like you said, form any kind of emotional attachment to it. Then but clothes are still being made somewhere, and there's it sort of feels really kind of usury, doesn't it? It's not really nice.
What about a slightly shift in topic on it, but what about then the accessibility of rental that it gives people who wouldn't normally have access to higher price points, maybe higher quality garments? What does everyone think about that?
But that's where I think it makes sense to me, and that's what we've been sort of all saying, I guess, is that it makes sense on certain items, but as a lifestyle approach, this is how I shop and this is the only way, I don't know, but and this is again like where if it's local, so say there's there may be a local connection to something as well, like, you know, if I've got pieces that I'm putting into a local pool of wardrobe hire, and I know that someone someone's sister or someone else needs something, and I know that they've worn it, then you have a shared story around something as well.
Yeah.
You know, the new wardrobe, just in the sharing thing, so they're not rental, but they're a sharing platform for clothes. So that, yeah, you sign up and you literally like peer-to-peer sharing of clothes, and you upload 3 items and people can just go on and choose. So it's taking out the financial transaction out of it and just bringing it right into that sharing space. Sorry if you're covering that on a different social, Joss.
Well, no, it's a different pile in our 7-day source, and that's a swapper pile. It's a swap, you know, and that's what. But how do we decide which one's in it? Financial aspect of it is, oh, could I make a bit of money from this, or could I spend a little bit money on that? Were you going to say something, Kalkadan?
Yeah, I feel like there are so many different kind of moral and ethical perspectives framing everything that we're kind of wanting from this solution.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to, so for example, on the question of accessibility in renting, I think that there is an overarching question of what do we kind of deserve in fashion? Like what's our right in terms of our access to fashion? Do we all have a right to access full choice, full price points, full quality? You know, what I was going to say full quality, but I do strongly believe that we all have a right to good quality clothing, but not necessarily choice and not necessarily price either. I'm not sure that that's the main goal of building sustainability into fashion, I think. And then earlier, when you were talking about physical spaces where people can rent, swap, repair, mend their clothing, I think there's also a question of how we share the kind of social responsibility of managing our waste. And, you know, we all pay for our waste in, you know, the cost of landfill or the cost of the environment or whatever. And so there's this public sharing of this burden, but it's disorganized. But if there was a function for it to be organised, so that we say, you know, there are institutions within our towns and cities that manage clothing waste, then perhaps that's the solution, like the missing solution at the point of, you know, the end of use from the user. Because I think it's a lot to ask each user to both care and have the skills to maintain their clothes. I think, you know, well, why would they? I think we have so many like real empirical evidence that that isn't the natural behaviour of most of our society. And I don't know that that's like the first type of behaviour to change, but maybe a behaviour that could be changed could be saying, okay, well, look, we're paying for clothing waste in these ways. Well, here's a solution. Let's pay for the solution instead of, you know, the impact of the costs. But yeah, I mean, that's just more questions, really.
Yeah, and I suppose there's the other angle on that peer-to-peer is if you have invested in a wardrobe, so if you have taken the time to invest in investment pieces, and then, like you said, for very specific people, and then you could rent those out, then that is, so, you know, like you say, we're this population, we have all you know, varying degrees of how we live, and, you know, and potentially all these different options are replacements for what we've been doing physically, and it just takes us to this new realm, like new layers of it, which provides answers for different people in our population who behave differently. Like, I mean, if you put your head in, put your feet in those shoes or whatever, stand in those shoes, this can be edited, can't it? Then it starts to feel like, oh, I get it, it makes sense. If you have a wardrobe that's got loads of designer pieces and they're just sitting there, if you don't want to sell them, rent them.
Yeah.
No, sorry, go.
Can we just do a really quick thing and see how it works? I'm just thinking, it's making me think, like, let's look at actually what we are each wearing today and just quickly go, like, how would I feel about this if it was rented? Would I want to rent it? Like, so I'll just go first quickly, and then let's each just do it quickly. This top I'm wearing, I got, it's 100% cotton. It's really comfy, and I got it for £3.99 in a charity shop in Totnes last time I was there. and I love it, and I wear it all the time. It's sort of medium weight. I wear it over a long sleeve t-shirt, and I definitely wouldn't like a piece like this. I want it in my wardrobe. I don't want to, you know, I wouldn't want to have this for 1 week and then it's gone, and then I'd be like, oh, you know. So I definitely, for me, I wouldn't rent something like this, and I wouldn't want to give it one. I wouldn't sort of feel like it was something that other people would necessarily want to rent. Kelly.
I'm slightly strange when it comes to my clothes. I'm laughing at your loved clothes or love stories, Rox, because I definitely have a couple of things, but in general I'm a bit like, I really appreciate obviously all the resources and skills that go into making clothes, but when it comes to actually owning them, I'm a bit like, oh, they're just material things. I'm a bit hippie like that. I would be happy for people to, like, I'm on the new wardrobe, I just share my stuff. I'm happy for people to, like, if I was to rent stuff, I'm like, yeah, cool, knock yourself out. I mean, I'm not gonna wear, you know, all of it. I don't mind. I've got a Catherine Hamlet, she's Social Life sweatshirt and some organic cotton jeans. I'm just like, yeah, take it, my jewelry, whatever. So I don't know if I represent the like mainstream kind of thinking around clothing, but I would, especially if I thought it would make someone happy to wear it, I'm just like, knock yourself out. I'm not going to wear this every day of the week. So I mean, I do have now, after years, quite a small wardrobe, to the point that I've met a few people over the last year who've said, wow, you look the exact same, which always makes me laugh. I take it as a compliment about my actual physical appearance, but I do think it's because I literally wear the same clothes all the time. But anyway.
Kat, what about you?
So I'm wearing like a really old t-shirt today, underneath, oh crikey, underneath my dress, and this is a t-shirt I got like in 2008, I think. I did buy it online, I'm afraid, from a t-shirt printing company in America, but you know, I've never given it away. It has sometimes gone into my charity shop pile, but it's always come out because I end up wearing it all the time. And my dress is actually, when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, shit, everyone's going to see my bump and I don't really want to be pregnant. And but again, it's something that like every summer it comes out. Just, you know, I end up wearing them, and that's like 6 years now. So yeah, I have quite old clothes in my wardrobe.
But is that something that you would rent? Like if you got it and you'd rented it and then you had to send it back, would you feel sad?
The t-shirt probably, but the dress, I mean, you know, if it was a rental where it was like it was going to the other side of the world when they had summer, and then I got it back in the summer, that'd be great. But yeah, it does end up coming out in all seasons though, so I don't know if I'd want people to rent it, but I do have pieces in my wardrobe that I wouldn't mind people renting, like as you say, like occasion wear. You know, I've got dresses from like my sister's weddings where I've been bridesmaids, and you know, all wedding outfits. For some reason I buy something new every time, but that's when they get worn.
Yeah.
What about you, Rox? What are you wearing?
I'm wearing, it's funny because Kat said that, I'm wearing this Beaumont organic dress, which it's called Beaumont organic. Anyway, I bought it maternity too, because I was just like, because it just literally is a tent. So the bump, and it just went with it, and then it's down. And I carried on wearing it. So I've had this since 2015, and I wear it all the time, to the point that, I think Kelly is saying, I think though, this may also come, let's blame Catherine Hamlet, sorry, because she when I was working with her, she has a uniform. She wears the same thing day in, day out. I find it really interesting. Lots of designers, I feel, are like that. They have a very specific thing that they wear. Maybe Westwood might be different, but there's most of them, there's kind of like a uniform. You see them wearing the same thing. I think I got into that groove. You kind of know what works, so you can just chuck it on and go. And it's really strange when you work in the fashion industry and you lose that kind of creativity around your wardrobe. Would I rent it? I would. It's a really nice dress, and I haven't damaged it. You know, it's really washed well, and I mean, I'd certainly, if someone was, I can't imagine renting it to anyone, but I could definitely lend it to someone who's pregnant and needed a dress that looked like a tent. But so that's the thing that I was going to say, Kelly, is the Chanel jacket from Portobello Market though. Would you rent that?
Yeah, I've clothes.
Oh, Kelly.
I know.
Bye, memories.
No emotional attachment. No, I do, but I also know that I love it and it's cool, but I don't wear it every day. It gets taken out like
Yeah.
here. So like, why not?
Yeah.
Spread the clothes, love.
Yeah.
What about you, Catherine? What are you wearing?
Yeah, so I wish I dressed up.
She went in, she's gonna go and get changed.
I could have, right? So I'm wearing a really old t-shirt, a brand t-shirt, our brand, but an old brand version. It's got stains on it. Earlier I thought that you guys won't see the stains and it's fine. and joggers, and I wouldn't want to rent something that's stained. I wouldn't like I might rent a version of this that isn't. In terms of making it available, like it means something to me. Like it's it's something that obviously is very personal to me, so I wouldn't really want to share it, I guess. So no. But there are lots of garments that I would rent if it was really easy to. Like what I find like an obstruction about renting isn't actually sharing my clothes. Like I'm really happy to share, I wear a very small portion of my wardrobe, so really happy to do that. But like photographing them, meeting somebody somewhere, just figuring all that out, like I think having to be on a site, getting messages to be, do you know what I mean? Like I think for that I'd need to know why, and I suppose it need to be incentivized somehow for me. And I think most of my clothes, apart from very nice stuff from Sancho's, most of my clothes, how much would you guys rent this t-shirt from me for?
It's got stains.
What's the market price for these stains? I think it's very high. So
If I didn't have one, if I didn't have any t-shirts, depends, doesn't it?
But Joss, I was thinking maybe this leads on to the other question you were asking about brands doing the buyback schemes.
Yeah,
because that the t-shirt that you're wearing, so say like I feel like a majority of the brands I work with for some reason tend to come from a jersey. There's a lot of jersey, t-shirt, sweatshirt, and I've always felt like those that is really challenging to think of a buyback scheme that will work. So you have your brand website, and then you have a section of it that people who've been wearing it they'd obviously be criteria on stains and stuff, but you can send it back, and then that could be sold to and you get some kind of voucher scheme, so you can buy new things, and then that will be sold on someone who wants that garment for a lesser price because it's been worn a few times, or I don't know what that criteria looks like. I can see how it works for the occasion wear, for the dresses, etc. I've never been quite able to get my head around the t-shirt, which is exactly why you're saying how much should you buy this for, because I think a t-shirt is very difficult because of its properties.
But there are ways to design better quality basics as well, right?
Yeah,
definitely. These are good quality basics. These are brands that are doing it well, but I still can't get my head around it.
Yeah,
I mean, like sorry, no, our t-shirts are great quality. It's not going to need to ask to name. I'm just down talking like our cool product. Like an idiot.
No, but absolutely quality comes into it, and I think that's where this sort of perception of a brand. So if I like this idea of this model where you can where a brand takes responsibility for what they make, and I think that's absolutely something that they should be taking way more responsibility for, and not just like making rubbish and then dumping it on us and then leaving us with with what to do with it. And I would love to be able to, I think it would be great if we could send stuff back to brands and say, hey, I'm done with this, your responsibility again. And there's something about like a sort of perception of brands. I think there's an opportunity for brands to make that a thing, and for them to be able to basically sell their clothes time and time. But there has to be a sort of quality built into it. And so and so and like you're saying, Dan, there has to be some incentive, and it falls down again for me on the sort of, oh shit, I've got to put stuff in a bag and put the address on it and go to the post office. The post office where I live is open between 8:30 and 10:30 in the morning, and that's it. And I sent a 2-kilo package to someone in England the other day. It cost me €50. I'm like, that's not going to work, you know. But whereas if I had a physical space where I could just drop in whenever I felt like it, and I could go and rent something like, you know, like Men's Assembly is going to be, that's what we want to create, is a space where it's actually physical. And I feel like from at the very beginning of this conversation, that's what we've all sort of said, is there's this tactility, there's this sort of connection that we build. Maybe not Kelly, but
Kelly, you have been identified. You're here on my screen.
I mean, but would it make a difference to you?
Turning up looking for my stuff now after this.
But would it make a difference to you if it was something online or something physical? Like, so if you're saying about renting your Chanel coat, let's use that example again.
Physical all the way for me, I think, and I mean, actually, I was talking a good game about I'd rent everything, but Calcadam, what you said about the logistics, absolutely not. And that's the reason that I actually haven't done rental before, is because 2 small kids, full-time job, my partner's got a full-time job, life is hectic, grand. But then in my mind, I want to do all these, you know, sustainability related things in my personal life, but that's where the barrier is. So that's the reason I've never probably gotten into rental or selling my own stuff a bit more. So what I tend to do, because I've got a couple of good charity shops in my local area, is in the moment I impulse charity shop by. And it's not impulse, I want to buy something. It's like impulse, oh, I've got 5 minutes. Oh, look, charity shop. It's that immediate. So if there was something like Men's Assembly rental in my area, yeah, I totally get involved in that. I'm very much about trying to even just bring this to local communities a bit more anyway. So yeah, physical space in that respect for me would be better.
Can I just talk about from a business perspective a little bit in terms of taking clothes back and using clothes? I think the main challenge that businesses will face is the difference between what it costs them to do that and how much they can earn from doing it, or offset through other business practices, right? I think what I've noticed is that businesses that are offering the buyback at the moment have an above average like markup in their pricing. So they have they're pricing their like the initial purchase higher in order to enable that, which in itself limits how accessible it is to different people. And then other business, they're faced with the reality that like as clothing degrades, in order to then like recapture that clothing, reorganize it, and then make it available for resale again, it's not worth what the current market value for that product would be. So like I think the only solution to it is for businesses to only create clothing that has a long-term value. You know, that's the behavior that would be the difference between an over extraction of resources and, you know, the over disposal of products that no longer have value to anybody, and, you know, the current situation we're in. And because of like what we're trying to understand with Schwab at the moment is to see if there's a way in which you could gather information about the long-term like use of garments, to see if you can measure how many days a garment's being worn, or how many times it's sold or swapped or rented or borrowed, and then take that information and then basically just make it available to both the public and to businesses. So businesses then have more information about how they can choose to design or create in a way that has long-term value, and customers have the ability to really challenge a business's practices. And I think on top of that, there is also a way to incentivize the people that create garments so that they have a way of extracting some of that long-term value from the supply chain. So not only do they're forced by transparency, but they're also able to gain more value from the resale of garments. I feel like I've said that in like a needlessly complex way, but I think the solution is in what incentives does the person currently extracting raw materials to produce garments as their business model have to change, and how you can change those incentives to like encourage a more sustainable practice. Because
that's sorry, okay, no, go. I'm saying that's where it comes back to Roxy's point in the beginning about renting from companies that rent sustainable brands, inherently sustainable brands.
Yeah.
And that's at the full maximum value that you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, I think I just don't, I don't know if I missed them, but I don't know of any at the moment. The most of the rental that I've seen are working with conventional brands, and then the language around it is that you are doing something sustainable by renting this clothing, and I'm thinking, well, maybe in the act of not buying something new and it going back, but if the provenance of all the fabrics and fibers and, you know, the workers that were involved in making that original garment isn't there, then one could argue that it's not really.
Well, actually, we've put together a little list, and it's on the Men's Assembly stories today, and we'll try and keep it as a highlight so people, because we just sort of scooped up a load of stuff and sort of thought, right, start having a look. One of them that I looked at was called Her, and it's HURR, and they look like they're actually focusing a bit more on they've got a very sort of sustainable, fashion revolutionary kind of messaging. I haven't really delved into it, but then there's also another one called Lone Hood, and so I think they're starting to crop up, and I imagine Calcadan, once you get yours launched as well, you'll have that sort of angle on it. I just think it's so brilliant. Can I just say that Calcadan and also Kelly, the way you guys is kind of, it seemed quite similar in terms of the way you're thinking about this and the sort of deep research that you're doing on behalf of all of us. So can I just say thank you for that, because I think it is really complex and it's not straightforward, and we need information, and we need it.
It's all about the impact. It's like, what is the impact of what we're trying to do or what we're trying to change? And what you don't want is this new solution coming along and everyone going, ooh, shiny, and then just rushing off to it, which is what happens in sustainability all the time. And not that I don't want things to progress, but it's just kind of like exactly what you're saying, Calcadan. It's like right back to the beginning of the supply chain, like what is the impact of what we're trying to do? So
yeah, absolutely.
So shall we just do a really quick fire round just to end the session, unless anyone's got anything burning they still want to share, just sort of say what your takeaways are, just quick fire. Do you want to go ahead, Calcadan?
Sure. So I think that this conversation has shown me some of the challenges with the renting model, and I think what's really interesting is the value you all put on having a physical space. I think people, even in the digital world, people want that kind of human-to-human contact and that ability to build relationships and share skills. And I think that's really, really fascinating and hopeful for the future. I don't know if that's what you were thinking in terms of summary, but yeah, I feel like that's what I've learned. And thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate speaking to you all.
Well, we're definitely
and
going to be.
You've all worked for that company in London. Was it Catherine Thomas?
Hamlet.
Hamlet, London. Yeah. So that must banging company. Cool.
Rox, what's your quick fire takeaways?
Well, honestly, my takeaway, Joss, is if we exchanged ourselves with 5 17 to 25-year-olds, what the conversation might have looked like. Because I don't know how old everyone is, but I think this might come down to also our culture of shopping and buying and purchasing, but also our relationship to technology. And I think we have a fairly good relationship with technology, but I just know that, I have a 10-year-old who is, the way he communicates, the way he knows what's going on, he can sit and listen to YouTube for hours, these people talking about, video games or horses or whatever he's into. I think culturally the next generation is quite different from us, so they may experience things in a very different way. So we all could, the outcome could be that the physical space is of interest, but I think we have to know that the next generation are, that maybe what's happening is gearing up for how everyone else is going to behave, which I think leads to what is going to happen to physical spaces, what is going to happen to physical shops. And maybe the men's assembly that you're talking about, the experience is not going to be about shopping. It is going to be about learning new skills. It is going to be, maybe that's why you come together physically, and all those kind of buying habits end up taking place online on your tablet. It's done. Now I'm going to go and do something exciting. So who knows what that, you know, it'd be really interesting to have this conversation with a, you know, what this conversation might look like with a different group of people. So
cool, interesting. Kat, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking much the same as I do with most things, that there isn't a right answer to anything, and you know, much the same, most sustainability and you know, recycling and upcycling things, that what's important is that you do your research and you make informed decisions for yourself and for the lifestyle that you have. And that you know, for a lot of people none of this is important, but for, you know, a growing number of people this is really important. And but there is a lot of greenwashing, and there is a lot of there's a lot of stuff to get around, and without doing your research you can't just jump on one thing. And I think it's so important to, because there is no right answer, that it's so important to make the decision based on what works for you, rather than because your mate's done it and it works for them, might not work for you at all. So I think, yeah, keep it as a personal thing to what you can actually physically do, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Kay, what do you reckon?
It's kind of a mashing together of Roxy and Kat's answer, in that yeah, I'd love to just see what this conversation would be like with a younger age group, or even actually with my own age group and my friends who do shop predominantly in the high street. I tend to ask them about things like this, and one of them in particular, she's an investment banker, quite a senior position. She's got a young family and her partner is working as well. And when I was talking to her about rentals, she was like, oh my God, that is my dream come true. Just someone to appear with a selection of clothes. And I was like, oh, and she would have been one of the people in the group that I thought maybe not because she needed a professional wardrobe. And she was just like, no, that would just be amazing for me. So it made me think, oh, and this is again when I go back to I'm in a bubble in a bubble in a bubble type thing. So it's just always, you know, what is the mainstream person doing and how are they shopping, and, you know, are they open? Kind of things. And then obviously, Kat, like you're saying, there is no solution, the perfect solution to anything, so it's just constantly researching, but then also not getting so bogged down in the information that you become paralyzed like me and end up not making any decisions and wear the same clothes for 20 years, or maybe that's a thing. So who knows?
Yeah, brilliant. I just think that we can't see anything in isolation from each other. So renting is not disconnected from buying, it's not disconnected from end of life, it's not disconnected. So I feel like we have to sort of always think of whatever it is, whatever level of engagement we're having with our clothes as part of the whole life cycle always. And so that, I feel like that's what we're trying to do with Men's Assembly, is kind of represent that somehow in a physical way, so that it's not there's never one solution. I think that's what we're all saying, there isn't just one solution. So it's part of the solution, it's one option, and within that option there's all these different variations of it, and for some people it works and for some people it doesn't. For some people, for a young person like you're saying, Roxy, it could be an amazing opportunity for like a 17 to 25-year-old who wants to start a new business. And I could see myself being that person. Like if I was that age now, I'd be looking at this going, oh my God, there's an amazing opportunity, I can buy and rent clothing. So it could be really fun in a way, but I do think it's really important that it always remains as part of this kind of bigger understanding. And I understand also what you're saying about the sort of offline v online, and I guess I'm just really pro, with everything that we're going through at the moment, I'm really, really pro offline still. And I feel like, yes, there's going to be a whole new level of online, and we're already having to deal. Look at us. I mean, look at us having this meeting here. And I don't know, I guess I feel resistant, especially around clothing in some ways, because of the physicality and what you get from the physicality of clothing that you just can't experience through a screen. And I feel like that's really important for us in terms of understanding about where things come from and where they're going and their impermanence. And like you're talking about Calcadan, they're perishable products. Why are they perishable? But blah blah blah. I'd value renting certain types of clothing. I think the key as well for me in my lifestyle, there's certain types of clothing that I'd be really happy to rent, and I'd be happy to rent mine, and there's other things that, like my t-shirt, I probably just wouldn't ever do that. But if it works for other people, then great. I think it's great that there's so many options. But like you said, like everyone said, do your research. And thank you all so much. You're all so brilliant, and it's such a pleasure to have all of your minds and just have this chat, and really, really hope that you'll join us again. We're doing our next social on Saturday. We're going to be talking about donating and gifting, but particularly looking more at what happens to our clothes when we donate them. Where do they go? Why are we donating them? All of that sort of thing. So yeah, and just really excited to just keep all the conversations going. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.